White-blue Tron, match 5. We are on the draw. So we have one land, which is pretty bad. We do have a prism and a map to help us find more lands. The map doesn't help until we draw a second land naturally, neither does the prism. But we do have 2 Journey to Nowheres, which is good versus a lot of decks. I think I'm going to keep this. I know it's a little bit of a greedy keep, but I like this hand. I like having 2 Journey to Nowheres, so I'm going to hope to draw a land in the first 2 draw steps. Our opponent leads with a Soul Warden. Okay. This could be tokens, or it could be a slightly different build. The version that I've played with Soul Warden is white-blue tokens. It basically plays mono-white tokens, and it only splashes blue for Keep Watch to draw cards. This looks like it's not that deck, though. This is not quite a token deck. It's more of a life gain deck, it appears. They also have a quicksand, so we need to not forget that that's on the battlefield. It says, sacrifice it, target attacking creature without flying gets -1/-2 until end of turn. Okay, so we'll lead off with the prism. The map is a little bit too slow. The prism helps us draw cards and hopefully hit our 3rd land naturally instead of having to find it with the map. We draw a repeal, which is not great, but it is an interaction spell, so that's decent. I also had the option to play Journey to Nowhere last turn, but it wasn't super important because we're only taking 2 damage. But now with Squadron Hawk also coming down, that means our opponent is effectively going to draw 3 cards. Yep, they reveal all 3, so they didn't have another Squadron Hawk in hand already. They're going to start putting more pressure on us. Next turn they can play 2 Squadron Hawks, so we'll be taking 2, and then 3, and then 5. So we need to do something pretty quickly. A Seagate Oracle and still no land. Well, we really want to draw a land, which makes me want to repeal the Soul Warden right now, main phase. What else could I do? I could just Journey to Nowhere a single 1-power creature. That doesn't seem like a winning strategy. I'm going to repeal the Soul Warden and try to draw into a land, and then I can play Expedition Map if the land comes into play untapped. And still no land. But if we hadn't have done that, we'd have drawn the Muldrifter next turn. And for now, we will discard, I guess, a Crusher. We'll probably find another Crusher before the time that we actually have Tron online and are ready to cast it. Here comes the Soul Warden back down again, and presumably a second of the pack of Squadron Hawks. And then we'll take 2 this turn and fall to 16. We don't really have a lot of ways to deal with a bunch of creatures at once in our main deck, unfortunately. The best thing we can do is play a Muldrifter and block these Squadron Hawks in the air, but obviously we can't cast a Muldrifter yet because we are very short on mana. Oh, perfect. A actual land. So now we can play a Seagate Oracle and be able to block creatures on the ground. We could play a Journey to Nowhere and a map and guarantee Tron next turn. So how good is Tron next turn? We could tap Tranquil Cove and a mine to find a power plant, play the power plant, have 5 mana and a Prophetic Prism. So that would guarantee Muldrifter next turn. I think I like that a little bit better. Although Seagate Oracle is a strong play as well. So I'll lead off with Journey to Nowhere. And I will target Suture Priest, as it's the scariest at the moment, and play this Expedition Map and pass. We'll be taking 3 down to 13, and then next turn we get to play a Muldrifter. And hopefully that'll be enough to stop the bleeding. If they find like a Bone Splitter or something to be able to power past the Muldrifter, obviously we're going to be in a lot of trouble. But I think this is the best plan for the moment. Alright, the 3rd of the Squadron Hawks. He's stuck on land, which is lucky for us because he hasn't been able to deploy that Squadron Hawks as quickly as he otherwise would be able to. So he has 5 unknowns and a Squadron Hawk in hand. We're at 13. And we draw an island. So if we didn't want to do the play where we search for Power Plant and play it into Muldrifter, we could play Island and have 4 mana, and then do Journey to Nowhere plus Condescend for 1, Journey to Nowhere plus Crack the Map. I don't think anything is as good as getting Tron and Muldrifter. So we go ahead and do that. I'm missing the Power Plant. Play the Power Plant. Now we see the power of Prophetic Prism and fixing our colored mana. Cast a Muldrifter and pass the turn. I'm going to block if my opponent attacks here. They could potentially have a pump spell if they are more of a tokensy build, but Or they might just consider it worth it to get in 3 damage and lose a creature. Either way, I can't really afford to not block, so I'm going to block. Quicksand only works on attackers, not blockers. Okay, so this is more of the tokens build, I believe. They've got the Guardian's Pledge. They could also have Remosian Rally, which is a 4-mana spell. Gives +1/+1, but you can pay. You can skip paying its mana cost by tapping an untapped creature you control, which is pretty cool. So we are at 4 life, and we have no blockers in the air right now. So we need to find another Mulldrifter or lock them out of the game with Rhystic Circle. So right now, if we play Power Plant, we'll have 10 mana, and we'll be able to cast the Rhystic Circle using Prophetic Prism. And will we have to use extra mana for that? Let's see, we'll have 2 Power Plants. No, because we can tap a Tower and a Tranquil Cove for white, and then filter into a white and cast Rhystic Circle. And then we'll have 3 2-mana Tron lands remaining. We'll have 6. So we could, even if they hit a land drop, they could only hit us for 2 damage, because they could pay 4 times and let 2 of them hit us. And then when we untap, we could be able to lock them out of the game for the rest of the game. I don't think they have any direct damage. They're playing mono white. So unless there's another color that's missing, I don't think they can get around it. There's no way they can prevent us from preventing damage. If they have a Bone Splitter, it's fine. We get to prevent the damage from the creature that's the scariest. So I'm pretty sure our play here is to play Rhystic Circle. Take some damage this turn, and hope our opponent doesn't have a pump spell again. Because even a +1/+1 pump spell plus a land kills us. Filter this into a white, play Rhystic Circle, and pass the turn. And if we can prevent them from killing us this turn, I don't think they'll ever be able to kill us. Just because we'll have so much more mana than them. And even if they play a lot of tokens, we should have more than enough mana to pay for all of their creatures plus all of their lands. Alright, there's the Remosian Rally. So I think we're dead. They pay 3 times, and we prevent... No, because they didn't hit the land drop as well. If they had gone land and then paid for Remosian Rally normally, we would have been in trouble. As it is, we are not, because they tapped a creature, which is one less creature we have to worry about. So I'm going to go ahead and tap all of this. Actually, I don't have to tap it all at once, just in case there's something weird going on. I'm going to activate Rhystic Circle, and I'm going to see if our opponent is going to pay 1 to counter the effect. But it appears right now, unless they have additional tricks going on, that even if they pay 3 times, I'll have 3 colorless mana remaining, and I'll be able to prevent the damage from the 3 attacking creatures and stay at 4 this turn. The question is whether they can play tokens fast enough to prevent us from being to play other spells while we activate the Rhystic Circle each round. And if we can't keep up by playing like a Seagate Oracle or a Journey to Nowhere every once in a while we're keeping up with Rhystic Circle, then our opponent could eventually go wide enough that we wouldn't be able to pay for Rhystic Circle enough times. So our opponent paid once, they did not pay the second time. So we're getting rid of 1 attacker. They're not paying this time. Get rid of the second attacker. And getting rid of this attacker. So we're not going to take any damage from attackers this turn. That's good. And let's see what our opponent does in their second main. We know they have a Squadron Hawk. They might just be playing that. Order of Liebtur, however you pronounce that. Alright, so that's protection from black. And they can pump it up and give it first strike. That's fine, no problem. Even protection from white doesn't work, as well as hexproof doesn't work with Rhystic Circle. It is not targeted. Next time the source of your choice, not target source or target creature or target spell. So it can get around protection pretty easily. So now we have 9, 10 mana. If I play Power Plant, I'll have 12. And remember, the important number to keep in mind is the amount of times they can pay plus the number of creatures that you want to prevent damage from. So let's always assume they can hit an untapped land. So they have 9 that we have to pay for. So if I pay this and have 12, then I'll have 3 mana remaining, and I can play a 3 mana spell. So I could play an Oblivion Ring, a Condescend, or a Seagate Oracle. I think the best choice is Seagate Oracle, and that's what I'm going to do. Our opponent is going to gain a lot of life, so they're going to make it somewhat hard to end the game with just like a Caravix torch, but it is still going to be possible, I believe. I took the expedition map there so we can keep on developing our lands. Next turn we can tap the tower. Okay, our opponent is going to pre-combat Battle Screech. Can I counter this and still have enough to prevent all these flyers? I believe I can. So if I go like this, yep, I'll still have plenty of mana remaining. So I'm going to do this, x equals to 1, and counter this Battle Screech. I'm aware that they'll still be able to flash it back, because it says flashback tap 3 untapped white creatures, but this manages the board and helps us. Okay, Muldrifter is quite good. So is Urza's Mine. I think I'm going to go top in this order, so I draw the Muldrifter first. And then I can play another Tron land next turn. Should be good enough. I would counter this as well if I could, even though the Scry 2 wouldn't do anything, because I like the 2 top cards in my library, just to cut down on the tokens, but... Alright, so now the important number is 5 lands, assuming they hit a land drop, plus 7 creatures is 12. So if I play the Muldrifter, and then I play the Mine off the top, I'll have 1, 2, 3, 4, 8, 9 mana? But I'll also have the blockers from... I think that's worth it for me. So I'm going to play this Muldrifter, well aware that I won't be able to prevent damage from anything for 1 turn, because it lets me have a blocker, and having a blocker is pretty powerful, because it lets me pay for less creatures on future turns. It makes them less likely to attack just to make me use my mana each turn. Doom Traveler, that's fine, I can resolve. Alright, let's do some math. If I had to end the game with Caravix Torch alone, and I had all 4 of each of my Tron lands out, that'd be 28 mana, which wouldn't be enough to kill my opponent right now. So I need all my Tron lands plus some more lands. So I'm probably going to have to win this game with an Ulamog's Crusher. That's good to keep in mind. Or at least do some damage with Muldrifters or Ulamog's Crushers. There's a Squadron Hawk. Can I afford to counter this? I'll still have 6 mana remaining. Our opponent could play a land, pay twice. I could prevent the damage from 4 flyers, so 1, 2, 3, 4. Block the protection from black creature. I don't want to counter this. It's just another flyer. I don't think it's worth the risk. I might not have had enough mana remaining. Generally, if you want to risk it by casting some spells instead of spending money on Rhystic Circle, you don't want to risk it twice in 1 turn cycle. So I already risked it by playing Muldrifter. I don't want to also Condescend. I don't need a spell. I don't need to counter. Alright, we're going to play this Mine. And also in Expedition map. So I can crack this at the end of my opponent's turn if I have mana remaining. I have 15 mana, which should be more than enough for the 10 creatures plus 5 potential lands, plus I have 2 blockers. Pass the turn. And now what our opponent can do, alright, they've conceded. What you can do to try to get out of this lock, if you're ever on the other side of it, is attack every single turn, make me use all the mana from Rhystic Circle, or make your opponent use all the mana from Rhystic Circle, and then hopefully they'll be tapped out in your second main phase. So then if you have a spell you want to try to resolve, like more tokens, then you could go for it then. You wouldn't want to do what our opponent did last, which was they played Battle Screech during their main phase, because then I could counter it knowing that they had less mana up for paying to counter Rhystic Circle. So let's sideboard and see if we can beat Tokens deck. Alright, so Fade Away is definitely coming in. It's just incredibly good versus Tokens. Even if it's not a full-on Tokens build with like the 2 mana Raise the Alarm type token makers, I think it'll still be places where I can get a blowout. As well, I'm going to take Rolling Thunder over Caravix Torch. I might end up with both of them, but I'm at least going to bring in Rolling Thunder over Torch to clean up tokens that I need to clean up. Sunlance is obviously horrible. Dispel can be very good for letting me block with Muldrifters and then dodge the pump effects. They could get around this by playing the pump effects first, and then knowing whether or not it's going to resolve before they let me block with the Muldrifter. But generally they're going to wait until after Muldrifter or Seagate Oracle blocks before they try to use their pump spells, in which case Dispel is very good. Relic of Progenitus is not that good against Battle Screech because you're generally not going to get priority between the time they cast it the first time and it goes to the graveyard and the time they cast it again, because they'll already have the 3 creatures necessary for flashing it back, and they'll just immediately flash it back. Aura Blast. There is a sideboard card in these decks, at least the one that I used to run, which is a morph creature that when it turns face up, it's an enchantment that gives you creatures +1/+1. And there might also be another enchantment in the sideboard. So this could be a consideration, but I don't think I'm going to bring it in until I see that card. So maybe game 3 if we have to go to there. Circle Protection, red and green aren't going to do anything for us. Divine Offering is going to do nothing for us. They had a Bone Splitter, I could consider bringing it in. Negates are a little bit expensive for what we're trying to do. I think the Dispels will do enough. Although most of the token makers, especially the scary ones like Triplicate Spirits and Battle Screech, are non-creature. So I could consider those as well. Oblivion Ring is quite bad. It's just an expensive answer to a single token. Journey to Nowhere is the same way, but it's nice for picking off an early creature that's not a token. I think I need the Ulamog's Crusher. I need to cut 1 card. Probably a Condescend. You don't want to have too many Condescends in your deck when you're on the draw. You run the risk of being too slow and not getting to cast them. So I think I like this. I could bring in 1 more Carevex Torch over Condescend, but I like well, I'll bring it in over a Journey to Nowhere. I like having the way to end the game without having to connect with Ulamog's Crushers too many times. Alright, our opponent is on the play. We have 2 Tron lands, a white-blue source, and interaction in the repeal. And if we can spike a tower off the top, just naturally or by digging for it with repeal and cycling this remote isle, then we could have an Ulamog's Crusher on turn 4, which is potentially enough to win the game. They could be bringing in or already have Journey to Nowheres in their deck, but this looks like a very good hand, so I'm going to keep it. Also, of course, Muldrifter is in star here. It blocks the flyers, it blocks the ground creatures, and it draws us through our deck. Alright, there's the turn 1 Soul Warden that we're probably going to end up repealing. Turn 2. Carevex Torch was not a good draw at all, but I think it's going to be okay. I'm going to get rid of this stop on my end step. I'm not sure where I got that from. And a Suture Priest. Alright, so we're taking 1 this turn. Back down to 20 from the life gain we had off of the Tranquil Cove. And now we have a choice of either repealing or cycling Remote Isle. Or playing Prophetic Prism. So I don't need the mana fixing right now of the Prophetic Prism, so I'd rather repeal and slow my opponent down and save some life. So I'm going to go ahead and repeal this main phase. There's no real reason to do it main phase. They're not going to cast a pump spell next turn. They're going to wait till they have more creatures on the field. Maybe in some world where they bring in some sort of Brave the Elements, God's Willing effect. I forget which ones of those are at common and which ones are not. There's also the one in a Phyrexian white mana that the red-blue Kiln Fiend decks love to run. So I'm just going to do it to make sure I don't get blown out by something like that, because I really wanted the repeal to resolve. Alright, we have 3 mana. The Tron land we drew is not the Tron land we needed. It's just another tower, or another power plant. What we need is a tower. So I could do Prophetic Prism and nothing else. I could evoke the Muldrifter, but I really want to save that to be a blocker. I'm thinking Prism is our best bet here. It draws us a card just like cycling the Remote Isle would, but there's a world in which we eventually need to cast this Remote Isle as a regular land. And there's also a world in which case we need the double mana, or double colored mana from Prophetic Prism. So I think I'll do that. We might end up using this Carevex Torch as a removal spell, which is not exciting, but we also have the Rolling Thunder, so it wouldn't be throwing away a win condition. Well, it would be throwing away a win condition, but we could have other ways to win the game, even if we have to use this to pick off a single creature. We already do have the red mana because we cast the Prophetic Prism. Our opponent casts a second Suture Priest. You have to keep these things in mind. Okay, they're going to go ahead and go for the pump spell right now. Well, they are pretty certain I don't have a counter spell up. So they pump their team, +1/+1, we take 6. We have to watch out for the Suture Priest, as I was saying, because when a creature enters the battlefield under opponent's control, that player loses a life. So we can't get too low and then not be able to cast our Mole Drifters. That's interesting. We got a map. So we could play and crack the map, play a tower, and then have 3 mana, which we couldn't do anything with. We could cycle Remote Isle, play Carvex Torch for 2. I think we kind of have to do that, unfortunately. So I'm going to play this map. I'm going to do Carvex Torch for 2 and take out a Suture Priest. That way, if our opponent has another pump spell next turn, we don't get down so low in life, and then have the Suture Priests force us to not be able to cast spells, or creature spells at least, because we will not be able to come back from that, I'm pretty certain. I'll go ahead and do this for 2, just in case. They can't cast Remosian Rally without an untapped creature to tap, but no reason not to overpay. And assuming no pump spell, I think we're in good shape here, because we have Tron and we can play Crusher next turn. Okay, so there's Battle Screech. Presumably they're going to flash it back this turn to be the most mana effective. Or not mana effective, but they get to tap 2 birds that can't attack this turn anyway, so it only costs them 1 point of damage to me. So I think they'll do that now. Or will they just attack with all 3? Okay. So they're going to opt not to... Okay, they're going to do it second main phase. So they're going to attack me for 2, then they're going to flash back the Battle Screech by tapping 3 white creatures. And then we're going to be at 11 points of health of life versus 7 creatures. Which is definitely not a good place to be. 1 pump spell will definitely kill us, even if it's just a +1/+1 spell. So I have options. I could play Mole Drifter to try to block, or I could play Crusher. So I have 8 mana, potentially 10 if I play another Tron piece. 10 is enough to cast a Seagate Oracle and a Mole Drifter? So the only way I'm beating a pump spell is if I play a Mole Drifter or a Seagate Oracle and I find a counter spell. And even then, they'll attack, I'll block a creature, I'll take 6 damage down to 5, and I'll still be in a pretty bad spot. So I could pretend that they don't have a pump spell, play a Crusher, and just hope for the best. Our opponent could afford to sacrifice lands, though, and just take the damage from the Crusher, and they would still outrace us pretty easily. This is quite difficult. So I'm going to start with Seagate Oracle because it's the cheapest option, and see what I can pick from the top 2 cards there. Oh, I forgot to count the life loss from Suture Priest. Yeah, that makes it that much worse. Another Seagate Oracle, or a Signet. Okay. Well, I'm definitely going to play this Mole Drifter because I need to block. I know it costs me 1 life from Suture Priest, but it gains me a life effectively by blocking. And then if our opponent has a land in hand and just draws lands for the next couple of turns until I can find... Do I want to play this map or do I want to cycle this Remote Isle? I probably want to cycle the Remote Isle and dig for like a Rhystic Circle or something. Anyway, like I was saying, if our opponent just has 2 planes in hand here, we could have won this game potentially at a very low life total, but nope, we have lost. Any 3 of these kill us, we can only block 2. And we are going to game 3. So our opponent didn't show us anything interesting, so I think we're going to have the same sideboard plan next game. Actually, I've changed my mind. I'm looking at this list one more time, and I don't want to try to mise and hit a Journey to Nowhere on a 1-drop or a 2-drop creature really early. I'd rather just have these negates in my deck, because the pump spells are really what kills us. And trying to remove 1 creature at a time versus a tokens deck is just not a good place to be. So I'm going to bring in these negates, and I'll actually leave in at least 1 Journey to Nowhere, just so we have some targeted removal besides the repeals, just in case, and we'll see how this works. Alright, game 3. We would like to play first. This hand is quite bad. If our opponent has no creatures and just token spells, and we draw a land, we could potentially play negates until we play a map and find more lands, but it just has 3 late game cards and absolutely no chances of casting them, so I have to mulligan. This hand is bad, but it's reasonable. I can play a turn 2 Signet into an Oracle into hopefully a Mole Drifter soon after, so we're going to keep it. Cap size is much too expensive to consider keeping, so we'll get rid of it. And we will play this remote isle and pass the turn. And hope our opponent's draw is not too fast for us. They don't have a 1-drop creature, which is a good omen. We will play our Azoria Signet and pass back. Our opponent doesn't have a Sutra Priest either. Well, this is just excellent. So we'll start off with a Seagate Oracle and try to dig for some more lands. Raise the alarm. Okay. So they do have the Raise the Alarm, even though I thought they did not. But luckily, Seagate Oracle is very good against that. Negate or Repeal? Repeal is very good against tokens. I can pay 1 blue mana, destroy a token, draw a card. But do I just need the negate versus pump spells? I think I'm going to take this Repeal, mainly because I really need to find lands so I can cast the rest of the spells in my hand, and the negate does not help me do that. I'm going to play this remote isle tapped. We still have found 0 Tron lands, so I don't think we're going to get to Tron anytime soon. But it is possible to cast Ulamog's Crusher with 8 non-Tron lands. Or rather, 8 lands and not having Tron. You're not going to do it with 8 non-Tron lands, but you might do it without having... I think I'm going to take the damage this turn. I really would like to keep the Seagate Oracle in play. And I'd rather be able to repeal a token that the Seagate Oracle is blocking in response to a Guardian's Pledge. Of course, if our opponent was bluffing just now, we missed out on killing a soldier, but I don't think that they were bluffing. Ooh, Standard Bearer. That's a pretty cool card. While choosing targets as part of casting a spell or activating the ability, your opponents must choose at least 1 flag bearer on the field if possible. So it kind of works well against certain strategies, but not so well against versus others. So I could hold open Repeal here, wait for the Guardian's Pledge, block the Standard Bearer, and then bounce the Standard Bearer. But I'd rather just play the Muldrifter, and now I actually am going to block and make my opponent use the Guardian's Pledge. But I'm only going to block with 1 creature. So if they use the Guardian's Pledge, they don't get the ultimate blowout of killing 2 of my creatures. And they'll only get 6 damage through. So I'm going to put Seagate Oracle on the Standard Bearer, because I don't mind losing the Oracle as much as I do the Muldrifter. There's the Pledge, as we predicted. We'll go down to 12. Alright, and now we have Tron, although not this turn, because we still have to play 2 lands, and we can't play 2 lands in a turn. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to cast Muldrifter and leave open Repeal on a token. I do realize that this is not going to let me repeal the Standard Bearer as I want to. Although, actually, no, I'm sorry. That was very bad of me. That was a punt. I can't repeal a token at all. I have to repeal a Standard Bearer. That's the whole point of what the Standard Bearer does, is force you to target it. I should have also played a Signet that turn. Oh well, hopefully it won't cost us too much. We get a Battle Screech and presumably a flashback here. Okay. And our opponent's not going to attack. Excellent. Another repeal. Okay. So we might actually just be fine. So I'm going to play, we now have Tron. I'm not going to play this Crusher just yet. I'm going to pass the turn. I realize I could cast a Crusher, I realize I could cast a Rhystic Circle, but what I'm going to do here is I'm going to bait my opponent into casting a pump spell of some sort, and I'm going to get to kill 2 of their creatures while blocking because of it. Okay, so we'll block the Flyers, because they're scarier, since future Seagate Oracles can block others. Wow. And our opponent didn't have a pledge. Excellent. Squadron Hawk. Alright. I wish I had a counterspell here, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to repeal the Standard Bearer first to try to find a counterspell for the Squadron Hawk, so they don't get to draw 3 more Squadron Hawks. And we'll see how this works out for us. A Seagate Oracle. Well, technically we could still draw a counterspell, so I'm going to try that one more time. And nothing. Well, that's unfortunate. Oh well. So they're going to get to resolve their Squadron Hawk and draw up to 3 more, depending on how many they currently have in their hand, which is going to give them plenty of gas. But we have Tron online, a Crusher, a Rhystic Circle, and I think enough life to work with that we can close this game out. Alright, so they have 2 more Squadron Hawks in hand. And a Standard Bearer is replayed. Okay. I think we should be fine here. Now, let's read this one more time and make sure this doesn't mess up Rhystic Circle. While choosing targets. Now, once again, Rhystic Circle does not target, so we can still choose all the creatures and be fine here. If we block 2 creatures, we're dead to even a +1/+1 pump spell next turn. So just playing a Crusher and hoping for the best probably isn't good. This is very interesting. So I can cycle a map for a tower, which is mana neutral, and have 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 mana remaining, which should be enough to dissuade my opponent from attacking next turn. And then after that, I can cycle another map for a tower and just keep on building up my lands and hope my opponent didn't sideboard in enchantment removal. I think that's going to be my play. Alright, so here's the Rhystic Circle, and we will pass the turn. I could also Seagate Oracle here, and then only have 4 mana, and not be able to prevent enough damage. But that runs the risk of our opponent going untapped land, Guardian's Pledge, pay 4 times and kill you. All for the small benefit of potentially having a counterspell in the top 2 of my deck. And one of the counterspells could be Condescend, which wouldn't even necessarily be enough. So I think I have to pass here and leave up Rhystic Circle activations. I could potentially have played a map, because it would have only cost me 1 mana. And still had enough for all these Rhystic Circle activations that I want, but I think that would have been too costly. So I pretty greatly want to get this Standard Bearer off the table. Just in case I draw more repeals, I'd rather hit tokens. So I'm going to block 2 creatures. I'm going to start activating Rhystic Circle and see what our opponent does. Alright, they're letting me prevent some damage. Activate it again. It would be nice to be able to prevent the damage from all these creatures, but it's more important to prevent the damage from the unblocked ones so I don't just die. Our opponent is asking, does it not have to target bear? I'm telling them that it does not target, so not affected. So it's possible that our opponent does not have a pump spell here, and was just counting on their Standard Bearer to prevent this Rhystic Circle from being effective. Alright, our opponent has conceded. We went 3-2 overall, which I think is pretty good for a somewhat rogue deck. In the future, I should be bringing out more mainstream decks and cycling through those first. Things like Delver, Mono Black, Affinity, and so on. Is it Blitz, and so on. They're often quite fun decks, even if they are more mainstream and well-known. So I'm going to cycle through the more popular of those and then maybe get back to the roots of this video with some more unknown decks. So thank you guys for watching. Leave me a comment below with all the misplays that I didn't even realize that I did, and your thoughts and what you want to see me play next time. Alright, this has been Pennywise Pauper with Jake, and thank you for watching.